Hi everyone, and I'd like to share with you a new game that I've created. So this is a court simulator, and basically it is a game where you can play as either the prosecution or the defendant, and you try to argue a court case. So all this is generated by ChatGPT, and I'll go through the prompt later, but this is the game. The AI will just generate a scenario for you, like in this case, John Smith and Mary Johnson are involved in a car accident, and these are the details. Okay, Mary is suing John for damages. The AI will then come out with the evidence for both sides, like police report for John, medical views for Mary's treatment. Okay, this is because Mary wants to sue John for injuring her. All right, then for the defendant, John, we have eyewitness testimony for a passerby who saw the whole accident and claimed that Mary was not wearing a seatbelt. So this means that the injury was caused by her. Some dash cam footage by John car showing that Mary was not wearing a seatbelt. So this corroborates with the eyewitness testimony. So these are the witnesses that we have for the prosecutor, Mary herself, as well as the police officer who wrote the police report. And the defendant, we have the eyewitness who saw Mary not have the seatbelt, and John himself. So this is how I did it. I actually asked ChatGPT to come up with like what are the phases, like opening statements is the current phase, and then the remaining phases we have evidence where both sides will present their evidence. The witness phases where the witness will be called to question. All right, this is the very interesting part. I split into 4 different phases because of the memory issue of ChatGPT. Sometimes they may not remember. Then we have like closing arguments, and finally the judge decision. So in this case, let's be the prosecutor. Let's try to make John pay for the injuries. All right. So let's see, how would you like to respond? All right. So prosecutor, for the opening, what we like to do. So I asked the AI to give me 3 broad intents. So over here, let's say I like to just emphasize Mary's injuries. All right. So let's go number 2. So the AI will respond for me. I could also type out the whole thing in the dialogue form. All right. So, okay, so this actually is not the kind of response that I would like. Okay, actually the thing would need to follow by the AI judge. So let's try to recreate the response and see whether this will be followed by the AI judge. Okay, so this is what happens. Okay, let's regenerate the response again. Oh, okay. So in this case, over here, they did not. I just wonder why they did not want to generate the AI judge, because it's supposed to happen. Okay, so this is one of the cases whereby there's some inconsistency sometimes for the. Then finally over here now we have the AI judge responding. So that took a while. Okay, so this part might need to be tuned a bit more. Yeah, so this is one of the inconsistency issues that we face. If we interface this in a game whereby there'll be an external like engine simulator that will prompt the judge to respond, then this will be solved. Okay, but right now I'm trying to squeeze everything into one ChatGPT prompt from a single ChatGPT. That's why it's like that. All right, so the defendant, all right, let's just let AI decide. Okay, the AI will be the defendant. I'll just type in the letter A. So I'm here today to present the truth. Okay, again, it did not let the AI judge respond. So this is kind of weird. There we go. It responds already. Okay, that's great. So let's continue now for the evidence phase. So you say we have dash cam footage showing that Mary's not wearing a seatbelt. All right, let's try to get this done. All right, so the first phase will be presenting the evidence. Let's present the police report first. So, Your Honor, I would like to present the police report as evidence in this case. The report states that the defendant, John Smith, was at spot for the accident. This report, signed by a police officer, will serve as concrete proof of John's negligence and responsibility for the incident, for the accident. And the AI judge will then continue. Defendant, you may present your evidence. So what we'll do is we'll let the AI decide again with the letter A. All right, so it's quite nice because like ChatGPT is quite good for generating dialogues and debates. It managed to generate the entire like statement for the court case. Okay, I'm not too sure whether this is an actual like professional court statement because I'm not a lawyer, but it's quite impressive. You can generate the whole thing already. You can simulate the whole court case with this. So yeah, this prompt took me about 2 to 3 days to tune, and I'm quite happy with the results. Okay, over here, what are the some of the broad intents? Call the police officer as a witness. All right, so the witness phase will now begin. Okay, So right now, what I'll do is maybe I'll call, like, what would you like to do? Let's call Mary Johnson as a witness, which is basically the, let me see, for witness, who is this? Prosecutor. Okay, so actually there's a slight issue here. Mary, oh yeah, Mary is the main person. Yeah, so Mary like to call herself, all right? So, all right, so the prosecutor would call Mary Johnson as a witness. Okay, so let's see whether there's inconsistencies here. Who is the person giving this prosecutor? The prosecutor is, yeah, it's not Mary. It's actually a lawyer for Mary. So there's no inconsistency here. So that's great. All right, so let's see. What can we do? We ask Mary to describe the details of the accident and her injuries. All right, let's just put 1. All right, you can also type out the response as a text. So yeah, I sustained several head injuries. Thank you. You may now cross-examine the witness. So the defendant will now cross-examine. They can ask, so let the AI ask what questions they want. So what did Mary say? Mary said that on the day of accident, I was a passenger in the car driven by my friend. All right, and I sustained several injuries as a result of the accident. All right, so were you wearing a seatbelt? No. So Mary was honest. All right, she didn't wear a seatbelt. Okay, let's continue with the next witness. All right, so the next witness will be, you can call or you don't call. All right, so let's just, in the interest of time, let's not call the witness. All right. Okay, so the defendant may now call the witness. So let's take a look at what the witnesses can be. So we have, let's call the eyewitness that was present. So let's call the eyewitness here. I swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. Right. So the witness will now describe, like, the defendant will now ask, let's just let the AI ask some questions to this defendant. Can you describe what you saw at the time of the accident, including whether Mary Johnson was wearing a seatbelt? So in general, it's quite consistent with what we generated earlier. All right, and they already know what are the witnesses needed, because in the, like, for the different phases, I've asked ChatGPT to generate this thing here. Where is it? I've asked it to generate what's the remaining phases. Let's see whether they did it. There we go. So this is where we ground the consistency in for the witnesses. So over here we have this. Let's see. Now it's my turn to ask as the prosecutor. So I would like to ask, okay, who is this person? The police act Mary Johnson was wearing a seatbelt. I would like to ask, okay, how did you know? How did you observe? Okay, because what did the person say? I saw the whole accident. Mary Johnson was not wearing a seatbelt. How are you certain that Mary did not wear a seatbelt? So let's ask the AI witness. So the AI witness say, I saw her clearly without a seatbelt when the accident occurred. What was your distance you viewed her from? Because we want to ask the witness, like, how far are you really sure that the witness is, are you really sure that Mary did not wear a seatbelt? I was about 50 yards. Okay, a clear view of cars and the people inside them. Could you describe how not wearing a seatbelt has caused aggravated injuries for Mary? All right, so you can keep asking the question. I'm not a medical expert. I only saw that Mary was not wearing a seatbelt at the time of the accident. I cannot say for certain how not wearing a seatbelt affected the severity of her injuries. So quite good, because the witness played the role, right? So let's go back to the start of the court case. I kind of forgotten already. So what we want to claim is that John was driving a car and Mary was a passenger in the other car. All right, so Mary was injured because of the incident, and they are trying to say that Mary got injured because of the seatbelt and not because of John. So let me see. Who would you say caused the accident? John or Mary? Let's take a look. Would Mary have still been injured if John, if she was wearing a seatbelt? All right, so let's take a look at what the witness would say. Have prevented or reduced. Thank you. No further questions. Okay, let's just end this. All right, and we can see what happens after that. All right, now it's the closing arguments phase. Let's take a look at what closing arguments we can make. And all right, so first we will, okay, let's just not emphasize the use of the seatbelt. All right, let's see. First one is liable. Second one is argue that failure. Let's do the second one, because even though Mary did not have a seatbelt, John caused the accident. I mean, we have questioned the witness, and right, Your Honor, throughout this trial, we have heard testimony and seen evidence that clearly demonstrates the defendant's liability in this case. The defendant was driving recklessly and caused the accident that resulted in Mary Johnson's injuries. While it is true that Mary was not wearing a seatbelt at the time of the accident, it is well established that seatbelt use can prevent or reduce the severity of injuries in the event of a crash. However, this does not absolve the defendant of liability. The defendant's actions were the direct cause of the accident and Mary's injuries, and the defendant should be held responsible for the harm they have caused. Thank you. Oh, actually sounds pretty nice. All right, let's continue with the next part. All right. So sometimes you have to click continue because you need to type continue because they did not prompt the AI judge to generate the output. So that is something that is still lacking in this prompt engineering. I tried to get the AI judge to keep responding, but like in a very explicit way, but unfortunately, because of the context length, it may not know like what it needs to do. All right, so thank you, prosecutor. Defendant, you may now make your closing argument. So let's take a look. Please respond in dialogue form accordingly to the judge's request. All right, let's take a look. Argue the accident was caused by Mary's failure. Okay, let's just let the AI do it because the AI is always be the defendant. So just let the AI do A. All right, it has become clear that the root cause of Mary Johnson's injuries was her failure to wear a seatbelt. All right, so let's continue and see who wins. All right, let's take a look at who wins. Now it's the judge decisions. All right, so we can see considered both sides. It found not liable for Mary Johnson's injuries. Evidence presented does not clearly demonstrate the defendant's liability. Okay, the accident was caused by a combination of factors, including Mary's failure to wear a seatbelt and defendant's action. However, the defendant cannot be held responsible for Mary's injuries, given the lack of clear evidence on their liability. Oh no, I've lost the case. Oh wow, wait, we can ask the judge, like, why the accident was clearly John's fault. Why is John not held liable? Because I'm not too sure. I mean, like, ask the judge. All right. Okay, but will John be liable for the damages on the car for the car for this accident? Because the car is not the laws of jurisdiction in which the accident occurred. Okay. All right. So over here, we did not give it the rules of the law, so it does not really know for sure why whether or not the car should be paid for by John. But I mean, if John caused the accident, then John should pay for it. Okay, so I guess I didn't do a very good job arguing for Mary because maybe I should have highlighted like maybe I should have highlighted about the seatbelt. I should just summarize the evidence presented in this case, which is in this case the evidence is the police report stating that John was at fault. I should emphasize this. Yeah. So this is just a rough simulation of the court case. You can just run the simulation many times and you get different court cases. So let me just like run this thing another time and just show you how this looks like for a second court case. So like over here, this is a robbery has taken place at the local store. And then you have like Mr. Smith and John Doe. Mr. Smith is the person who reported to the police, and John Doe is the culprit. So over here, you can see that these are the different phases and so on. So I've actually split the phases into all this for the witness, as I explained earlier, because of forgetting. But for evidence, I think evidence phase is quite boring. So like sometimes, you know, you might, instead of just presenting two evidence, you only might present one. And I think that's fine because honestly, the more fun part for the court case is to query the witness. All right, so over here, let's just take a look again. Okay, let's try one more time to see whether the AI judge responds straight away. So let's just put 1 here. And I just want to see whether the AI judge responds. All right, so John Doe is Okay, so this is the AI prosecutor. And there we go. See, why didn't it respond like that just now? So yeah, this is one of the things that, you know, could be improved on, because sometimes there's a lack of consistency. But overall, you can see the results are pretty nice. So we can let the AI argue for this, and let's take a look at what happens. All right, so this is what happens. The AI responds for the defendant. Okay, so you can see now the judge did not get queued to respond. So this is something I need to improve on. I mean, I spent 2 to 3 days fine-tuning this prompt. All right, but because like I think it might be easier if we can have like a hierarchy of like GPTs, like the top level can just control the flow of the game, while the bottom level is like more of the details of each phase. That would be better, because right now I'm only doing one GPT, and you know, this kind of thing might happen. So you see, I clearly put here which will be followed by the AI judge, but it's not being followed. If we had type like continue over here, then you see the AI judge will. Yeah, so maybe I could have just typed continue and so on. Yeah, so let's just see whether if I continue this. Like, I mean, let me just write some dialogue here. So let's say I like to say, I would like to present the testimony. See, now the game flow is going on. All right. So let's not go through the rest of the flow, because that will be the rest of the court case. But I'll just like to cover like how I generated this prompt. So this is a bit of engineering hack, because you want the AI to stop generating at this part here. When you have input required prosecutor, you want the player to give the input. You do not want the language model to keep generating, which can be very irritating. If you let the whole AI model generate the whole case, all right, that player doesn't need to play anymore. So in this case, I say that the court simulator is called Jarvis. All right, the player is termed you. All right, so you are the player. So that's why I need to mention this you here. Typically, when I prompt the language model, I would say that you are a problem-solving machine. You are something. But because the player input over here, when we call for the player input, is what would you like to respond? All right. If I had started the prompt to the GPT with "you are a court simulator," then when it sees the word "you" here, what happens is that it will just respond. It will just respond on behalf of the player. So that's not what we want. So recently, I've seen this like in AutoGPT, some AutoGPT prompt that I saw on Twitter. They said that they use the word "the language model," and the language model GPT understands it's referring to itself. So this is a hack, okay? Because we want to make the word "you" refer to the player, all right, for player input. All right, so this is the description. AI judge and witness will be simulated by Jarvis. Proceedings flow in a dialogue fashion with this speaker's name dialogue. All right. So this is what we do. Display multiple items in a list. Okay, these are some formatting guide. Okay, Y represents content Y, which should be preserved as best as possible. All right, because we sometimes the model tends to hallucinate. So sometimes if I don't do this, you know, it may not give it exactly. So this tries to make it more and more exact. So this is the introduction that we want. This is where we let the AI generate the case for us. And note that I defined this curly brackets here. So I found this a nice hack, right? So I learned this from like Hacking GPT. They also specify examples inside these curly braces. And if we do this curly braces, you can just put the thing that you want GPT to generate inside this curly brace, and GPT can then generate for you. So like situation description can be generated, evidence, and so on. So this worked really well, right? These are the different phases of the game. And for witness, we specially specify the witness name and relation, and whether it's prosecutor or defendant, so that the AI knows what to do. All right, the closing arguments, the judge. So all this will be like prompting the judge, okay, to ask, okay, this side, prosecutor, then after that, the defendant. Right, I also specify some things like, oh, do not give any objections, because sometimes the AI objects to the other person's opening statements, although the statement has not been made yet, or same thing for evidence. So it's kind of irritating, because like when it sees the word objection in the prompt, it tends to just generate objections that sometimes have no basis. All right. So then we have this like Jarvis begins with an introduction and the opening statements at the start of each phase display this. So this is to preserve the context. All right. The judge will then prompt one side and prompt the other side. And I put this here: if there's unresolved issues, continue prompting the relevant side, so that the AI judge can make a decision by itself. Like, whether it should continue the prosecution or the defendant. Because different phases have different ways to prompt. Like for the witness phase, you need to keep prompting the same side to ask question. For the other phases like evidence, you need to rotate sides, at least in my opinion, okay, as a non-lawyer. Right? If you are a lawyer and you want to say that, oh, the court proceeding should be done something different, you can let me know in the comments, but this is how I interpreted it. All right. And we want to make it fun, so we don't want to make it too draggy, like the court case can take 2-3 hours. So we want this game to last in 15 minutes. Right. So I would say I'm not a very good lawyer. I lost the case just now for Mary. Oh else. but anyway, this thing is quite exciting because like just by stating the phases here, the game flow can already be prompted. Okay, of course, because of the context length, you want the game flow to be kind of similar. Like you want prosecution, defendant, and prosecution, defendant. If you want to do something different, you need to prompt the model in some way to generate this kind of cues like, oh, bracket defendant, bracket prosecution, so you know who to start first. Okay, so these are kind of the hacks that you need to do because like we don't have a separate GPT for each phase. Okay, ideally, we want a separate GPT for each phase. We also want a separate GPT for the AI judge, separate GPT for your prosecutor, separate GPT for your defendant, so that some informations are private. Okay, if we put all the information out here, each of the different roles that are being played has access to everything. So sometimes, like at the beginning, when it saw all this evidence over here, it tends to think that the evidence has already been presented. Okay, so what I did to resolve this issue is actually in this prompt over here, like the prompt for the prosecutor and defendant. So instead of giving it in dialogue, because over here, when we ask for like the suitable broad intents, okay, instead of asking it for dialogue, all right, what we'll do is we ask it to give a cause of action and the broad intent so that it doesn't sound similar to what is presented in the earlier part. Because if we don't, basically, if we don't let it give a dialogue, the chance is that the prosecutor, defendant, and the AI judge would tend to take it as it's not presented yet. So if it's of this kind of form, this means it's like action plan. It's not exactly the dialogue. So this is a way to bypass that, right? But of course, if you have separate memories for the judge, separate memories for the prosecution, separate memories for the defendant, then you don't have to do this. You can put dialogues here because this will only appear to one side, right? So these are some things that can be done. And I find it very cool. You can just put a brace here and you can just put what kind of broad intents you want it to generate, and it can generate for you. So this is a bit of prompt engineering hack to just let the AI know how to generate the output. So, and as what you've seen, just this simple prompt alone, okay, although it took me 2 to 3 days to engineer it, it can simulate a court case. And it's simulating it quite realistic as well, realistically as well. You can ask the AI questions about why it does certain things. You can take the role of someone and prompt the witness, and the witness has his or her own personality. Of course, some improvements will be like you can put some personality to the judge, put some personality for the prosecutor or defendant if it's the AI one. Like some will be more will argue more with you, some will be more passive. Then like for witness, you can put like irritated, happy, upset, then they will respond in that kind of character. Right now, I do not do that because I want to keep this as generic as possible. But this kind of way of prompting it in order to do a simulator, I think it's a very exciting use case of GPT. And this is all inspired somewhat by the generative agents paper. Like you have different agents with different personalities. And I feel like this is the same case when we do this for this court simulator. You need different personalities, different kinds of arguments for each side, and overall it needs to flow in a cohesive whole, which I see GPT-3 doing quite well. All right, and that's all for today's video. And play around with this. Let me know how you feel about it in the comments. And thank you. See ya.